And Mr. Hand takes away the ladder to get out. You know, manipulates it so the ladder that he was trying to go for is now on the opposite side of the pool.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to talk about Mr. Hand because Richard O'Brien's great.
Yes.
Obviously, he's super well known off the Rocky Horror Picture Show. But he's great in this, and he's got that weird kind of dialogue where most of his lines end with yes.
Where he's almost he turns it into a question.
Yeah. Every line is actually a question. But he's got that good look. He's obviously the one that looks, like the most like Nosferatu, and he's got like the long hands with the black gloves that he, would kind of wave in front of everyone's face to get them to go to sleep.
That's right. Yeah.
He tries it on Murdoch, and that doesn't work, and then it's obvious that Murdoch is special. Like, why aren't our tricks working on him?
They call it tuning.
Yeah, tuning.
Which Murdoch is also able to tune, and that's the problem for the strangers throughout the film, is trying to figure out how this guy got their powers. Mm-hmm. They even tell Sutherland's character in the middle of the movie, like, that's impossible that a human would be able to do that or figure out tuning. It takes you guys like 12 lifetimes to figure something out like that.
Getting into like X-Men territory, he's basically a mutant. Mm-hmm. He has that telepathic power, telekinesis, and then he's able to, like you said, tune. But he can. When he has that first confrontation with him, he makes the wood start falling away behind the strangers as they're walking towards him.
Yep.
He can create the doorway when he's trying to escape Bumstead. When Bumstead comes to get him, he creates the doorway to get out into the alley to get outside of the building, and then it immediately disappears when Bumstead gets down to the basement. Mm-hmm. So he's got that mutant ability, which he somehow either acquired or, like Sutherland says, evolved. He evolved enough. Now, I don't know. There's no sense of time as to how long that these people have been in this experiment. They're not dead, as, Mr. Hand says. Do they live normal lifespans because they're still human? Or does being in this environment, in this city, somehow prolong their life and they just kind of keep...
It seems like they're resetting.
Living over and over and over again.
But also not, because...
You see, like, his uncle gets older.
Mm-hmm. And Emma, and, like, different things happen. They're not repeating anything. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily starting over. Maybe time-wise, the strangers are obviously taking away the sunlight because they can't stand it, right?
Not just that, but, I mean, they're in space. They're literally in space where there is no sun. And at the very end, after he defeats him... I'm assuming Murdoch creates the sun, like he does the beach and the ocean and everything else. I know that they don't like the water. That's why there's no ocean, no beach. I think Sutherland says that the water...
Yeah, it just makes them nervous or something. Remember when Mr. Hand's by that pool, he's all weird. He hates it. He's just like, I would never come down here, but, there's...
Yeah, and I think that's why Sutherland, like, kind of moves to the middle of the pool.
Yeah. Jennifer Connelly is great, but underused. Her and, of course, she has a way bigger part than Melissa George, but I was just like, come on, guys.
Yeah. Connelly's Emma, that's supposed to be John's wife. And, again, going back to Blade Runner, it's always the implanted memories that they have that, oh yeah, like I remember this, I remember, my life and, meeting you and having all these memories with you, but it's like, this is the first time we've probably met. Everything else is implants. But she's his wife, she had an affair, that's why he left. At least that's what we're supposed to believe, what the strangers want us to believe about these characters. But that's where we enter the story on her character.
She's like a
singer, like a club singer.
Mm-hmm. And she's really good. Is that really her? Do you know?
I don't think that's her voice.
No?
No, I think someone, or she lip synced.
Oh, okay.
Or someone is dubbed over.
I'm gonna say
her voice.
Shit, she's really good.
She's got like a pretty good, especially in her younger days, though, like kind of a good smoky voice that would work for that. But I think in the research I found out that's not actually her. Someone else is doing the singing. But that club is so like 1940s. And she's got, like the pinup look to her.
Yeah.
In that, speaking of the pinup look to her, like the Rocketeer.
Oh, yeah.
All the way. But that's how she gets pulled into the story is, Bumstead. She goes and she meets with Schreiber, who is Sutherland's character. And, he says he's been treating him. And she's like, oh, he's never mentioned you. I don't know who you are. And then she gets pulled into the investigation because Bumstead's looking to see who killed all these women. Prostitutes, really, is what they are. And then we find out later on that he's not the one doing the killing. It's the strangers.
And
by carving the circular... that maze pattern.
That's how the movie starts. Is Keyes?
They were trying to frame him for
John Murdoch. He wakes up mid.
Yeah.
While Schreiber's trying to inject him with change his identity. Right. Mm-hmm. He wakes up and kind of blocks it, and that's when Schreiber realizes that this guy is different.
Yeah.
Or he has some kind of powers. And then, of course, this, that tips off the entire movie where the strangers get mad and the chase is on. Also, if I'm not, am I mistaken? They change. So when the conclusion of the film happens and Murdoch kills the strangers, then Anna doesn't know. She doesn't have any of those memories anymore.
Yeah, Emma becomes Anna.
That's right. That was my question.
Yeah, after they take over, when her and Bumstead leave the police station, they take her. Oh no, she's with them when they go to the edge of the city. Mm-hmm. They show up. The strangers show up with her. And they want Murdoch to stand down, and they threaten her. So that's kind of why he stands down. And then when they get down to the lair, they put her to sleep, and they change her memories, and she's no longer Emma. She's now Anna. And at the end, she obviously has no recollection of John. And they kind of meet for the first time, quote unquote, on the pier at Shell Beach, or across from Shell Beach. She's working at the theater. She's in the box office at the theater. Mm-hmm. Gets on a bus that's headed for Shell Beach at the end, which John has created by flooding the outside of the city and creating the sun. And she meets him on the pier. She's standing out on the pier looking out at the ocean. And John goes to see her and talks to her. And she obviously doesn't know who he is anymore.
But she asks him, hey, do you want to go do something? Or?
Yeah. Which is a really great scene earlier in the film when she's sitting out on the bench out by the waterfront, by the canal. And Mr. Hand, who has injected himself with John's memories as a way to kind of figure out how John thinks so that they can follow him and defeat him. He's injected himself with his memories, and he goes to that same spot where they met, and he asks, what are you doing here? And she's like, I met my husband here. He says the thing about the ferry. Mm-hmm. When I was young, they had a ferry that was all lit up like a birthday cake. And she says, that's what my husband said the first time I met him. He's like, oh, really? He's like, yeah. How do you know this place? She says, I met my husband here. And he's like, I met my wife here. Or no, he tells her that's where he met his wife, and she says this is the place where I first met my husband. He's like, oh, small world. But that scene's really great when the two of them, when he's basically saying what John said and giving the same story that John would have because he now has his memories. But just his delivery of those lines. And when she says, oh, this is the first place I met my husband, he's like, oh, small world. And then he just kind of like tips the hat and walks off. And leaves her kind of wondering, what the fuck? What just happened? But yeah, I agree. She's a little underused in the film.
I guess the studio, even though she was known at that time.
Oh yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, I guess the studio she wasn't She wasn't their first choice.
Do you know who the other choice?
No. Unfortunately, no. I wish I did.
I'm trying to think of like what big movie she was in prior to that, besides The Rocketeer, which is what I really know her from.
There's something, and I can't remember, but she did.
I remember Career Opportunities with Frank Whaley, which I think is either 91 or 92, so around The Rocketeer time. I'm trying to think like what else she was in those 5 or 6 years between these two films. Yeah, I wish she was in it a little bit more.
Because Requiem was after this, right?
This is about a year or two after that.
Yeah.
That might have been the movie that kind of put her over the top. Talking about another bummer movie. That last act of that film is fucking wild. I do want to shout out the writers of the film. I mean, you mentioned them. And, Proya obviously was his story and wrote off of that. But his co-writers, Lem Dobbs, who wrote The Limey for Steven Soderbergh, which I think was a year, maybe 2 years after this. Mm-hmm. Good movie. Highly recommend that one. He also wrote The Hard Way with James Woods and Michael J. Fox, which is a really fucking fun movie. Mm-hmm. Goyer, I guess, was just kind of starting out, but he had written the Crow sequel, City of Angels, and I think that caught Proyas' eye, because I think Proyas is a producer on that movie still.
And Blade.
And then Blade was his big break. I wouldn't say this should have been his big break, but Blade, which I think he got this movie based off of his script for Blade. Blade had a really long production.
And it wasn't out yet.
It wasn't out yet.
Yeah.
It came out later this year, in 98, but I think before Proya really got underway on this film, when he was just trying to get the movie made, or before... when he was trying to get studios interested, I think he brought Goyer on based off the strength of the Blade script, which had been around for a little while, and Blade was just taking forever to get made. I just know that I think Blade was shot maybe a year before it even came out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they had to reshoot some stuff and figure some more stuff out. Goyer is obviously pretty well known for working with Nolan on the Batman films. Oh, it's obviously a soundstage because it's not outside. But, and according to my notes, the end of the film on the pier is one of the only times that they were at an exterior location. But the sky and everything around that's not real. You can obviously tell that's a green screen. But according to my notes, it's saying that the pier is one of the only exterior locations they shot at. It wasn't a soundstage.
So the pier was real?
Yeah.
Oh. They did all this crazy shit, canals and things, and they couldn't make a pier? All right, guys. I'm just saying.
That's what my notes say. That was what the research told me, so...
The miniature work, we didn't really say...
Yeah, the miniature work is good.
Killer.
I noticed that when I was watching the movie last night. I watched it last night, but I was so tired that I only made it about halfway through.
You fell asleep?
I didn't fall asleep, but when I start zoning out, where I'm like, oh, I just missed like 5 minutes of the movie somehow, either you nod off or I'm just like, my mind is completely elsewhere. I had a really long week, so I worked a lot of hours this week.
Yeah.
So, like, by the time I sat down to watch last night, I was even lucky to get last night to hopefully be able to watch it. I started